Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the next video on direct taxation concepts. Today I would be discussing on residential status and tax incidence of individuals. In this video, the key takeaway would be the meaning of residential status and tax incidence of individuals, the difference between citizen and residential status, importance of residential status, classification of residential status for individuals under Section 6, and the determination of residential status of individuals and exemptions to the basic rule of residential status determination. So first, let us understand what do you mean by residential status. Residential status is determined for the purpose of establishing whether a taxpayer resided in India in a given financial year or not. Determination of residential status helps in computing the tax liability of taxpayers. The resident determination terms are separate for each taxpayer, such as individual, Hindu undivided family, companies, BOUs, AOPs, and firms. For individuals, it depends on the period of stay in India, and for HUF companies, depends on management and control. Now, all of us would have got a doubt. Is citizenship and residential status one and the same? No, it is not the same. There is a difference between citizen and residential status. An individual may be an Indian citizen, but becomes a non-resident for a certain year. Similarly, a foreign citizen may become a resident of India for income tax purpose in a given year. It is also worth noting that the residential status as per income tax differs to sorts of people such as an individual, corporation, a company, and so on, decided differently. Now let's understand the importance of residential status. The residential status determination is important for deciding the tax liability of an individual. If he is a resident, the global income of a person is also taxed. And for a non-resident, the Indian sourced income is going to be taxed. Coming to compliance requirement, the determination of residential status is very, very important. The resident individuals are required to file the tax returns in India, whereas non-residents are not required to file tax returns if their income is below a specified limit. And the third reason for determination of residential status is double taxation. An individual can be a resident of more than one country and may be subject to double taxation. And to avoid this, an individual's residential status plays a very important role. So residential status can help individuals claim tax relief, relief under the double taxation avoidance agreement. Now, classification of residential status of individuals under Section 60. For individuals, the residential status is categorized under three headings. And this is based on length of time he or she is in India and whether she or he has lived in India or not. This basically is computed, or it includes, for his or her current fiscal year as well as the previous year. So residential status under Section 6, an individual is classified as a resident or a non-resident, and if he is a resident, he is further falls under the category of resident and ordinary resident, and resident but not ordinary resident. Now let us take a quick look at this classification of residents. For classification of residents, or to determine the residential status of individuals for tax purpose, basically an individual needs to satisfy two conditions: the basic conditions and the additional conditions. So now let's see what are the basic conditions and what are the additional conditions to determine the residential status of an individual for tax purpose. First, let's look into the basic condition. There are two basic conditions. An individual, he or she, stays in India for 182 days or more in the previous year is the first basic condition. That means a year preceding to the current year or the assessment year, an individual had to stay in India or had to be in India for at least 182 days. And the second basic condition is that he or she should stay in India for 60 days or more during the previous year, and also stays in India for 365 days or more in the 4 years immediately preceding the previous year. For example, the previous year for the assessment year is 22-23, so he has to stay for 60 days. And for the preceding 4 years, so the preceding 4 years for the previous year 22-23 is going to be 21-22, 20-21, 19-20, and 18-19. So in these 4 years, a total of 365 days he must have been resided in India. Note, if he or she does not fulfill the first basic condition, then you look into the second basic condition. Coming to the additional conditions, there are two additional conditions. So he or she has been a resident in India for at least 2 out of 10 previous years immediately preceding the previous year. Now coming to our assessment year 23-24, previous year is 22-23, and we have 10 previous years immediately preceding the previous year. That's 21-22, 20-21, 19-20, 18-19, 17-18, 16-17, 15-16, 14-15, 13-14, and 12 and 13. So in any of the 2 years, he must be a resident. So it means that he has to satisfy any of the basic condition. And coming to the second additional condition, he or she has been in India for at least 730 days or more when during the 7 years immediately preceding the previous year. So for example, for the assessment year 23-24, the previous year is 22-23, and the preceding 7 previous years is going to be 21-22, 20-21, 19-20, 18-19, 17-18, 16-17, 15-16. In this 7 years, the individual need to have stayed in India for at least 730 days. A total of 730 days he had to stay. So these are the additional conditions and basic conditions. So based on this fulfillment of these conditions, the residential status would be determined. Now, if an individual satisfies or fulfills any one of the basic condition and also fulfills both the additional conditions, then the individual is called as a resident, but ordinary resident. So an individual to become a resident, he should at least satisfy one basic condition. If he satisfies one basic condition and fulfills both the additional condition, he becomes a resident and an ordinary resident. If an individual satisfies any one of the basic condition and does not satisfy both the additional conditions, then the individual is called as a resident but not ordinary resident. And when is an individual called as a non-resident? If an individual does not satisfy any one of the basic condition, then the individual is called as a non-resident. So to be a ordinary resident or a not ordinary resident, an individual has to satisfy one of the basic condition. And based on the satisfaction of additional conditions, he would be declared as an ordinary resident or a not ordinary resident. Now, there is an exception to the rule of basic rule. We have the basic rules, two basic rules. So there is an exemption to the residential status determination. If an individual, he or she is a citizen of India and leaves India during the previous year for the purpose of employment outside India or as a crew member of an Indian ship. And the second situation is that if an individual or an SSE, he or she is a citizen of India or a person of Indian origin and is already outside India and he visits India during the previous year for any purpose, in this case, he will qualify as a resident of India only if he stays in India for 182 days or more. Such individuals are allowed a longer time greater than 60 days and less than 182 days to stay in India. However, from the financial year 2021, the period is reduced to 120 days or more for such an individual whose total income or other than foreign sources exceeds rupees 15 lakhs. So with this, we come to the end of the video. Thank you. Have a nice day.